Hello and welcome to our Up a Notch Learning Book Club. I'm here today with Amrit Malhotra, who is a registered social worker with dozens of years of experience in Ontario, Canada. So welcome, Amrit. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And my name is Stephanie Dobson, and I am the founder, CEO, and content creator here at Up a Notch Learning Inc. We're very excited to be doing this book club because what we know is that there are so many resources to help separating and divorcing families as they go forward in their journey into two homes. And what we want to do is to really talk about some of these very important books. So today we're going to be looking at a book called Mom's House, Dad's House, and it's by the author Isolina Ricci. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right. And she has created an encyclopedia of sorts. And so we're very excited today to be talking about how this book can really help you as you go through your journey. All right, so let's get started. Amrit, do you want to start out by talking about a few of the themes that you've picked out from the book?
Absolutely. Sure. I mean, this book is very beneficial as a guide. It recognizes the importance of children's needs, as well as understanding what the human adjustment side is of divorce and normalizing some of the reactions that people may be experiencing. So, getting those tips for easing the transition and the healing can be very helpful for people.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you talk about the tips. One of the things I noticed throughout the book that makes it really very digestible is the author has put quite a few things in boxes, as they go through the various chapters and some bullet points, and really has emphasized some really key takeaways from the book, which helps to take away the sort of, I call it the encyclopedic nature of this book that makes
Yes.
it a little bit more digestible. So I know I've got my sticky notes on all of those pages that have all of the that have all of those boxes, because that's really what I think the important parts of the book are.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
when I went through, I was sort of wanted to bring out what the central idea is in the book. Of course, there's a ton of concepts in here, and as you can see by the spine, it is a huge book, and even by the writing on the inside, I mean, it is really quite encyclopedic in nature. But what really struck me was the author's discussion about the power of mindset, because when you're moving into two homes, so often this is a very foreign concept, and people often they're going through their first divorce. They've never done it before. They've never thought about divorcing, never talked to professionals about it, don't really know much. And so to have a book like this at the very beginning of your journey where you can digest it as you go along in your journey is so helpful, because she really talks about how mindset can impact how you go forward. And so if you have a negative mindset, or if you're trying to, drudge up the past and sort of go down into the mud with your former partner, that is going to have an impact in every way in your separation. But she really tries to help you from the very get-go to be thinking about it from, well, what the name of the book, that, Mom's House and Dad's House, and how to create two homes for your children.
Absolutely. Training yourself to move away from some of those emotions, acknowledging them, but also be able to navigate through the system and find your way through it. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's super important. She touches on so many important aspects in here.
And when you talk about moving away from the emotions, I really like the part she talks about going from positive intimacy to negative intimacy and to a business-like relationship. And that whole section really helps to normalize what's going on, and to say, because so many people going through separation and divorce are sort of emotionally thinking, kind of what's happening. This sort of is a bit of a roller coaster, and really being able to understand that this is a normal part of it. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, you're going to have days where you really can work very effectively and well with your former partner, and you're going to have days that you don't. And how do you move from the up and down, the roller coaster, to over time, to more of a business-like relationship? And so I found that concept really very helpful as far as, again, normalizing that transition.
Yes, she speaks about negative intimacy and recognizing, what the signs are when you're not able to kind of let go of the other person, and where you're becoming too involved, over involved potentially in the other person's life, and not seeing that separation. And then there are even tests and guides that you can go through in this book, and that's also very, very helpful. Um,
What would you say impacted you the most about the book?
well, I think the Family Bill of Rights, I think it's
Hmm.
excellent. I too
I
have
chose
lots
the
of
same
stickies.
thing. I chose the same thing. Yep.
Yes, it is wonderful. I'm just going to read through it because it's so
Hmm.
good. It talks about how each child has the right to have two homes where he or she is cherished and given the opportunity to develop normally. Each parent has the right to a meaningful, nurturing relationship with each
Hmm.
parent. Each parent and child has the right to call themselves a family, regardless of how the children's time is divided. Each parent has a responsibility and right to contribute to the raising of his or her child. Each child has the right to have competent parents and to be free from hearing, observing, or being part of their parents' arguments or problems with one another. Each parent has the right to his or her own private life and territory, and to raise the children without unreasonable interference from the other parent. I think this is almost something that can be photocopied and cut out and put on your fridge to kind of remind you on a day to day basis what's really important.
Hmm. And this book is a book that I picked up years and years ago, right at the beginning of my practice, and it has impacted me. And interestingly, I actually did just that. I blew it up onto a poster board, and 18 by 24 or something, and I framed it, and I've had it on my wall at my office since then. And with the idea that that's how much it impacted me all those years ago, and it still impacts me now, because to
Mhm.
me, the reason it's so impactful in my view is because it really speaks to going to that next level of rights. It talks about the rights of the children, and to be loved and to be cherished and not to be put in the middle. It's just a different frame of mind than I think a lot of families come to separation and divorce with, because of course the emotionality around the uncoupling process is sort of
Yes.
often on the forefront, and it's hard to think about these kind of things until until you read it. So that really has impacted me as well.
Yes. Well, she also talks about the TLC, temperament, resilience, the level of development and prior experiences, the constitution and physical sturdiness for the children. So I think that's very insightful. It's very important to
Mhm.
have the awareness as a parent, because you know your child best and what will be most helpful for your
Mhm.
children. And sometimes having that reminder to consider those
Mhm.
needs, it's very important.
Mhm. And what's interesting about the TLC part is really having parents be reminded that it's important to think about your children individually, not just your children
Correct.
as as we have three children, and therefore this is how we lump them to a certain plan or a certain
Yes.
um, future or certain childhood. Really thinking individually about what is best for each of your children individually, and then of course on a whole as well.
Yes.
But to come up with that detailed parenting plan that really individualizes the children, so that they're really at the forefront. We talk
Yes.
about putting the kids first. To me, that TLC concept is really what putting kids first really is for me.
Yes. She
Um,
actually has a whole section. Sorry, Stephanie. She has a whole a
mhm,
section on what affects children. So, what happened in your family before you separated, and how your child was affected by it. How well you and the parent handle the changes and decisions you make during the crisis period and into the future. How well you can respond to and what I call your child's unique TLC, and meeting
mhm,
the needs of love, support, protection, despite your own grief and fears. Um, so there's
mhm,
so many points that she mentions here. How well you can maintain your relationship with your child despite the changes in residence.
mhm.
It's really impactful on the children if they don't get to have that time with both parents.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
when I think about what new concepts I learned while I read this book, as I said, I've had this book for so many years, and every time I read it, I learn, I pick up something new and something different because there's so many concepts in it. And that you were just mentioning about what affects the children, that piece of it was something that became reinforced for me as I was reading through it this time. And even talking about things, how to, further ideas for keeping the kids out of the middle, is another piece of it. Again, focusing on the children. That's really where I spent a lot of my time as I reread this book for our discussion today. Is we talk about putting the kids at the top of the priority list. But what does that really mean? Because when people
Mhm.
come to meet with me, that's what they always say. Of course, my kids are my top priority. But what does that mean? How do we actually do that? And there's a whole list of things. And so even I'll just mention a couple of them because they were very impactful for me and just something that refreshed my memory about some action items that parents can take. So, for example, go directly to the other parent for information or an answer. Don't badmouth the other parent in their presence, the presence of the kids. Do not participate in your child's angry feelings about the other parent. Encourage your children to speak about their difficulties with the other parent to the other parent. Do not ask your children about the other parent's life or circumstances. Do not ask the children to keep secrets about you from the other parent. That to me was such an
Excellent.
actionable list. And it can be really hard. And, when your child comes back from their time at the other parent's house and they talk about how, they had a great time making cookies, and then sort of the inquisition starts almost, and almost without intention. But that kind of list really helps to remind us that we don't have to interrogate them. We don't have to ask them extra questions and really get
Yes.
down to the nuts and bolts of who were you making cookies with and how long were they there and what did that sound like. Is just allowing the kids to express themselves about the other parent without putting the children in the middle.
Right. And that speaks again back to that negative intimacy that you were speaking about earlier in the book.
Hmm.
So just in allowing each party to have their own boundaries
Yeah,
and
and
their
their own
own special
households.
time. Yeah, their own households and having that special time with their children. So that's very important.
Yeah. So, what did you think about the audience? Now, obviously, the audience is separating and divorcing families, but what did you think? Do you think it was well suited for the intended audience, or not?
I do think it contains so much valuable information, but I do think it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's so it's so there's so much information. Like it's really really thick. And if you look at my stickies, I have a lot. I have a lot of them because
Mhm.
it's packed with great ideas. But I think if you're in the middle of a crisis and you're struggling with a lot of things, it may be too overwhelming to read. So I do think the table of contents would be very useful for people to just flip to the section that's important to them, just to break it down into more manageable pieces. It's nice that they have the key concepts in little boxes. I think that's lovely. I do think it says mom's house, dad's house. This could be applicable to for same-sex couples as well. That's
Mhm.
something I just want to mention. So I don't want the title to push anybody away. I think if you have children that are living in two homes, this is applicable, and any
Mhm.
of these things that are shared in here can be utilized. So,
Yeah.
what about you?
Um, so I absolutely think, I mean, to me, this is a go-to resource for families. I have it in bulk in my office, and I give it to
Mhm.
every one of my families when they come meet with me. Um, the one thing I really like about this book in particular is that you can pick it up and literally just pick a page, any page, and start reading. And you don't have to have really read a lot before that or a lot after that. You can sort of pick and choose 5 or 6 pages and just sort of a concept, or as you said, go to the table of contents and think about what you might want to read about that particular day, and really just have a slice. Um, and I do think it's, of course, it's suited for separating, divorcing families, but I think it's applicable to any stage in your journey. See, that's what I really like about it. Is it's not just for when you
Mhm.
first separate. It's not just when you're, 10 or more, or 5 years separated. The one piece to it, so for example, here it describes the map, right? So this is the sort of going from the stages from really still being in one household to, very well established into two households, and sort of what that looks like. And so to me, this book is applicable in all of those stages, right? Thinking about separating,
Yes.
just separated,
Yes.
going through the transition, maybe with lawyers, other divorce professionals, court, whatever it is for your family, and even once you're settled and everything has been, you've got the professionals out of your life and you're sort of just now living life. So that's what I find is it is well suited, but it can be overwhelming as you described. So just being able to break it up into pieces is really nice.
Yes.
So what would you say as to why someone might want to read this book?
I think someone who's looking for some answers, feeling maybe they're going to people that are closest to them and they're not able to get the type of guidance that they're needing. Perhaps people are not supportive of the split and they're not getting reinforcement. Perhaps they just want to clarify some information that may have been shared by people that have gone through the process or from their professionals that are involved. Because there are a lot of really important items in here, even just dealing with the parenting plan, dealing with assisting the children to have their own space within two homes. There's so many different aspects, even transitioning into other relationships. It's from start to finish. So I think it's really useful from that perspective.
Yeah, and for me, I would think I sort of thought of sort of 3 points as to why someone would want to read this book. For me, as I read through it, one is to normalize what's going on. So normalize the stages of separation, normalize the grief process, normalize the emotions, normalize what might be going on for the children. The second thing is about setting up two homes effectively. I think about it as, a teenager who's learning to drive for the first time. And do they learn first from a parent who might have some bad driving habits or who may not be an effective driving teacher, instructor, and then that teenager can get some bad habits, and then later on, a few years later, says, maybe I should go back to driving school, and then has to sort of undo a bunch of the sort of perhaps not so great driving techniques. Whereas the person who's just getting their driver's license, going through driver's education right from the get-go and really starting out their driving career with really good habits. And so that's, to me, what I see this book as, and why someone would want to read it, is to learn from the very beginning before you make a whole host of mistakes. And when I say mistakes, what I mean is, when the emotions are flying and you're just separating and you really don't know, you're the blind leading the blind, you don't know what you should be doing or who you should be talking to or whose advice you should be taking. This is really a good way to learn some good techniques and some good foundations really easily right from the get-go. And then the third thing was about getting some good ideas about how to set up two homes. So it's kind of a combination of the second one, but so creating some good ground rules and and some good co-parenting techniques. So those were really kind of the 3 that I thought of why someone would want to read this book. All right. Language of the book. What did you think? Good, bad, too much, too little?
I think the language was plain, but if you're a newcomer, or let's say English is not your first language, I don't know how accessible it would be. I think having this in an audiobook form might be really helpful, just because it's so dense of concepts. There's just so much volume to it. So I think it could be very overwhelming. Also, if you're visually having any types of difficulties, is the print is really, really small. So a larger print for some may be more beneficial.
Or maybe even the electronic book, on the iPad
maybe.
or the Kindle or something like that, where you can increase the size of the font. sort of thing might be helpful. Now, you talked about the audiobook. I do have the audiobook of this as well, and I like it because I can skip around and I can go to the sections that I want to go to, and it's digestible.
Mhm.
But I almost wonder whether it would be hard to absorb, because I can't even remember how long the audiobook is, but I wonder if, it might be hard to absorb in an audio format just because of how much information there is, and to try to
Mhm.
remember it. I know I have to kind of go back and forth to these concepts often, right?
Right.
Read and reread things. Anyway, um, just thinking out loud sort of thing
Sure.
as to the different formats. Um, I also thought that the language was very good. I thought that it was very plain language, very understandable. Some of the legal concepts that are explained, I thought was very good how they did it, how the author did it. So often people get confused about the legal language and what that means, but at the end of the day, it's about the substance, right? How are we going to
Mhm.
parent our children together? How are we going to financially support our children together? However the laws work in your particular jurisdiction, of course you have to figure that out and make a plan that works for your family. But just even talking about the difference between the word child support versus financially supporting your children, right? So it doesn't matter sort of what the legal wording is, or custody, right? The different ways that custody can be interpreted, and it's geographically specific. So, custody, the word custody in Canada is different from the word custody in the US or in Australia or in Europe. And so it's really, I thought it was really good in internationalizing these more difficult legal concepts into just concepts. Instead of legal concepts, just concepts of parenting from two homes. All right. So the last the last question that we have on our list is, what have you learned after reading this book, besides everything?
Yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I think that this is definitely a must read for anyone who's going through a
Mhm.
separation or divorce, because it is so comprehensive, and again, it just normalizes some of the reactions from a mental health perspective, to know that there are periods where things are going to seem really, really out of control, and you need something to kind of anchor on, to hold on to help you guide your way through it. So this is a really essential tool for people to have,
Mhm.
because it's just written from a very unbiased perspective.
Mhm. And what I can say is, I agree with you. And what I can add to that is, to me, what was really emphasized and what struck me was the importance of language and perspective, because it really impacts the way that you're going to go forward into two homes. And so, if you have some positive and effective ideas right from the get-go, you're going to have more luck and more positive foundational material on which to build your effective two-home family. So to me, that's what I learned, was the importance of language and perspective. All right. Well, thanks so much
Right.
for joining us
My
today.
pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll see you in the next book club.